Alright guys, here I am sideways through the steering wheel in an awkward position because I I can't mount it any other way, sorry. I was gonna actually talk about incarnations and the myriads of different ways a soul can end up here, which I've made already a number of videos of quite a long time ago, but I've been having a lot of sort of visions, I guess, of a totally different kind of process. And it was rather strange, so I'll probably save that for a live stream or something like that. But basically it's through trance-like states. There are souls here, just to summarize briefly, there are souls here that are literally in a trance on their home worlds, and they are simply visiting here, or were enticed to come here, or whatever the case may be, or there were more nefarious things going on, but that's pretty interesting. So I'm reading Morals and Dogma, yeah? It's an incredibly long book. I mean, this guy, he is something weird. There's actually been a lot of synchronicities with this book that have fallen in line with some of the visions and stuff, and the stuff I've had over the last year or so. And he really just kind of does a breakdown of every religion, of Eastern mysticism, of Kabbalism, of Egyptian mythology, and it's really bizarre because in between all that, he just would randomly talk about random social criticisms, right? And a really strange guy, and he goes into detail about Christianity and different sects of Freemasonry, and I wanted to read it for many years. It's taking me forever because it's such a long book, so I just want to read you a part of it just so you can have an idea, that he is quite a brilliant person. I'll give him that. And he has some interesting takes on society. So here we go. There is no human soul that is not sad at times. There is no thoughtful soul that does not at times despair. There is perhaps none of all that think at all of anything beyond the needs and interests of the body that is not at times startled and terrified by awful questions which, feeling as though it were a guilty thing for doing so, it whispers to itself in its inmost depths. Some demon seems to torture it with doubts and to crush it with despair, asking whether, after all, it is certain that its convictions are true, and its faith well-founded, whether it is indeed sure that a God of infinite love and beneficence rules the universe, or only some great remorseless fate and iron necessity hidden impenetrable gloom into which men and their sufferings and sorrows, their hopes and joys, their ambitions and deeds are no more interest or importance than the motes that dance in the sunshine, or a being that amuses himself with incredible vanity and folly, the writhings and contortions of insignificant insects that compose humanity and idly imagine that they resemble the omnipotent. What are we, the temper asks, but puppets in a showbox? O omnipotent destiny, pull our strings gently, dance us mercifully off our miserable little stage. It is not, the demon whispers, merely the inordinate vanity of man that causes him now to pretend to himself that he is like unto God in intellect, sympathies, and passions, as it was that which at the beginning made him believe that he was, in his bodily shape and organs, the very image of the deity. Is it not his God merely his own shadow, projected in gigantic outlines upon the clouds? Does he not create for himself a God out of himself by merely adding indefinite extension to his own faculties, powers, and passions? Who, the voice that will not always silent whispers, has ever thoroughly satisfied himself with his own arguments in respect to his own nature? Whoever demonstrated to himself with a conclusiveness that elevated the belief to certainty in that he was an immortal spirit, dwelling only temporarily in the house and envelop of the body, and to live on forever after that shall have decayed. Whoever has demonstrated, or even can demonstrate, that the intellect of man differs from that of wiser animals, otherwise than in degree. Who has ever done more than to utter nonsense and incoherencies in regard to the difference between the instincts of a dog and the reason of man? The horse, the dog, the elephant are as conscious of their identity as we are. They think, dream, remember, argue with themselves, devise, plan, and reason. What is the intellect and intelligence of the man but the intellect of the animal in a higher degree or a larger quantity? In the real explanation of a single thought of a dog, all metaphysics will be condensed. And with still more terrible significance, the voice asks, in what respect the masses of men, the vast swarms of the human race, have proven themselves either wiser or better than the animals in those eyes of higher intelligence shines than in their dull, unintellectual orbs? In what respect they have proven themselves worthy of or suited for an immortal life? Would that be a prize of any value to the vast majority, that they show here upon earth any capacity to improve, any fitness for a state of existence in which they could not crouch to power like hounds dreading the lash, or tyrannize the defenseless, weakness in which they could not hate and persecute and torture and exterminate, in which they could not trade and speculate and overreach and entrap the unwary and cheat the confiding and gambling and thrive and sniff with self-righteousness at the shortcomings of others, and thank God that they were not like other men. What to immense numbers of men would be the value of heaven, where they could not lie and libel and ply base avocations for profitable returns? Sadly, we look around us and read the gloomy and dreary records of the old dead and rotten ages. More than 18 centuries have staggered away in the spectral realm of the past since Christ, teaching the religion of love, was crucified that it might become a religion of hate. And his doctrines are not yet even nominally accepted as true by a fourth of mankind. Since his death, what incalculable swarms of human beings have lived and died in total unbelief of all that we deem essential to salvation. What multitudinous myriads of souls, since the darkness of idolatrous superstition settled down thick and impenetrable upon the earth, have flocked toward the eternal throne of God to receive his judgment. The religion of love proved to be for 17 long centuries as much as the religion of hate, infinitely more the religion of persecution than Mahometanism or unconquerable rival. Heresies grew up before the apostles died, and God hated the Nicolaitans while John of Patmos proclaimed his coming wrath. Sects wrangled at each other as it gained the power, persecuted the other, until the soil of the whole Christian world was watered with blood and fattened on the flesh and whitened with the bones of martyrs and human ingenuity, and was taxed to its utmost to invent new modes by which tortures and agonies could be prolonged and made more exquisite. By what right, whispers the voice, does a savage, merciless, persecuting animal, to which the sufferings and writhings of others of its wretched kind furnish the most pleasurable sensations, and the mass of which care only to eat, sleep, and be clothed, and wallow in sensual pleasures, and best of which wrangle, hate, envy, with few exceptions, regard their own interests alone, with what does it endeavor to delude itself in the conviction that is not an animal as the wolf, the hyena, or the tiger are, but somewhat nobler, a spirit destined to be immortal, a spark of the essential light, fire, and reason, which are God. What other immortality than one of selfishness could this little creature enjoy? Of what other is it capable? Must not immortality commence here, and not life a part of it? How shall death change the base of nature, of the base soul? Why have not other animals that only faintly imitate the wanton, savage, human cruelty and thirst for blood the same right as man has to expect a resurrection and eternity of existence, or a heaven of love? The world improves, man ceases to persecute. When the persecuted become too numerous and strong longer to submit to it, that source of pleasure closed, men exercise the ingenuities of their cruelty on the animals and other living things below them, to deprive other creatures of life which God gave them. And this is not only that we may eat their flesh for food, but out of mere savage wantonness is the agreeable employment and amusement of man, who prides himself on being the Lord of creation, and a little lower than the angels, if he can no longer use the rack, the gibbet, the pincers, and the stake. He can hate and slander, and delight in the thought that he will hereafter luxuriously enjoy the sensual beatitudes of heaven, see with pleasure the writhing agonies of those justly damned for daring to hold opinions contrary to his own upon subjects totally beyond the comprehension both of them and him. Where the armies of despots cease to slay and savage, the armies of freedom take their place. The black and white commingled slaughter and burn and ravish. Each age reenacts the crimes as well as the follies of its predecessors. And still war licenses outrage, turns fruitful lands into deserts, and God is thanked in the churches for bloody butcheries, and remorseless devastators, even when swollen by plunder, are crowded with laurels and receive ovations. Of the whole of mankind, not 1 in 10,000 has any inspiration behind the daily needs of the gross animal life. In this age, and in all other men, all men except a few in most countries are born to be mere beasts of burden, collaborators with the horse and the ox, profoundly ignorant. Even in civilized lands they think and reason like the animals by the side which they toil. For them God, soul, spirit, immortality are mere words without any real meaning. The God of the 19th, 20th centuries, the world is only Bel, Moloch, Zeus, or at best Osiris, Mithras, or Adonai, under another name, worshipped with old pagan ceremonies and ritualistic formulas. It is the statue of Olympian Jove, worshipped as the Father in the Christian Church. That was a pagan temple. It is the statue of Venus, become the Virgin Mary. For the most part, men do not in their hearts believe that God is either just or merciful. They fear and shrink from his lightnings, dread from his wrath. For the most part, the only thing that they believe that there is another life, a judgment and punishment for sin. Yet none will less persecute as infidels and atheists those who do not believe what they themselves imagine believe, and which they do not believe because it is incomprehensible to them and their ignorance and want of intellect. To the vast majority of mankind, God is but the reflected image in infinite space of earthly tyrant on his throne, only more powerful, more inscrutable, and more implacable. To curse humanity, the despot need only be what the popular mind has in every age imagined God. In the great cities, the lower strata of the populace are equally without faith and without hope. The others have, for the most part, a mere blind faith, imposed by education and circumstances, and not as productive of moral excellence or even common honesty as Mohammedism. Your property will be safe here, said Muslim. There are no Christians here. The philosophical and scientific world become daily more and more unbelieving Faith and reason are not opposites in equilibrium, but antagonistic and hostile to each other, the result being darkness and despair of skepticism avowed or half veiled as rationalism. Over more than 3/4 of the habitable globe, humanity still kneels, like camels, to take upon itself the burthens to be tamely borne for its tyrants. If a republic occasionally rises like a star, it hastens with all speed and to set in blood. The kings need not make war upon it to crush it out of their way. It is only necessary to let it be alone as soon as it lays violent hands upon itself, and when a people long enslaved shake off its feathers, it may well be incredulously asked, shall the braggart shout for some blind glimpse of freedom, link itself through madness, hated by the wise, no law, system, and empire? Everywhere in the world, labor is in some shape the slave of the capital. Generally a slave to be fed only so long as he can work, or rather only so long as his work is profitable to the owner of the human cattle. There are famines in Ireland, strikes and starvation in England, pauperism and tenement dens in New York, misery, squalor, ignorance, destitution, the brutality of vice, and the insensibility to shame of despairing beggary in all human cesspools and sewers everywhere. Here a sewing woman famishes and freezes. There mothers murder their children, that those spared may live upon the bread purchased with their burial allowances of the dead. Starving, and the next door young girls prostitute themselves for food. Moreover, the voice says besotted race is not satisfied with seeing its multitude swept away by the great epidemics whose causes are unknown, and of justice's wisdom of which the human mind cannot conceive. It must also be ever at war. There has not been a moment since men divided into tribes when all the world was at peace. Always men have been engaged in murdering each other somewhere. Always the armies have lived by the toil of the husbandmen, and the war has exhausted the resources, wasted the energy, and ended the prosperities of nations. Now it loads unborn posterity with crushing debt, mortgages, all estates, and bring upon the states the shame and infamy of dishonest repudiation. Doesn't that sound like today? Crushing debt. This is written in the 1870s, and I'm going to read about less than 2 pages. This is getting long. At times, the baleful fires of war light up half a continent at once, as when all the thrones unite to compel a people to receive again a hated, detestable dynasty, or states deny states the right to dissolve the irksome union and create for themselves a separate government. Then again, the flames flicker and die away, and the fire smolders in its ashes, to break out again after a time, with renewed and more concentrated fury. At times the storm revolving howls over small areas. Only at times its lights are seen like the old beacon fires on the hills belting the whole globe. No sea but hears the roar of the cannon, no river but the runs red with blood, no plain but shakes trampled by the hooves of the charging squadron, no field but is fertilized with the blood of the dead, and everywhere man slays the vulture gorges, and the wolf howls in the ear of the dying soldier. No city is not tortured by shot and shell, and no people fail to enact horrid blasphemy in thanking a God of love and victories for their carnage. Dooms are still sung in the eve of St. Bartholomew and the Sicilian Vespers. Man's ingenuity is racked, and all his inventive powers are tasked to fabricate the infernal enginery of destruction, by which human bodies may be more expeditiously and effectively crushed, shattered, torn, and mangled. And yet hypocritical humanity, drunk with blood and drenched with gore, shrieks to heaven at a single murder perpetrated to gratify revenge not more unchristian, or to satisfy a cupidity not more ignoble than those which are promptings of the devil in the souls of nations. One more page. when we have fondly dreamed of utopia and the millennium, when we have begun almost to believe that man is not, after all, a tiger half tamed, the smell of blood will not make the savage within him we're of a sudden startled in the loose dream, to find the thin mask of civilization rent in twain and thrown contemptuously away. We lie down asleep like the peasant in the lava slopes of Vesuvius. The mountain has been long inert, that we believe in its fires extinguished. Round us hang the clustering grapes, the green leaves and olive tremble in the soft night air over us. Above shine peaceful, patient stars. The crash of a new eruption wakes us, the roar of subterranean thunders, the stabs of the volcanic lightning unto the shrouded bosom of the sky, and we see aghast the tortured Titan hurtling up the fires among the pale stars, its great tree of smoke and cloud, the red torrents pouring down its side. The roar and shrieking of civil war are all around us, the land, pandemonium, man again and savage. The great armies roll along their hideous waves, leave behind them smoking, depopulated deserts. The pillagers in every house, plucking even the morsel of bread from the lips of a starving child. Great hairs are dabbed in blood, and innocent girls shriek in vain and lust for mercy. Laws, courts, constitutions, Christianity, mercy, pity, disappear. God seems to have abdicated, and Moloch to reign in his stead, while press and pulpit like exult at the universal murder, and urge the extermination of the conquered by the sword and the flaming torch, and to plunder the murder entitles the human beasts of prey, and thanks of Christian senates. Commercial greed deadens the nerves of sympathy of nations, and makes them deaf to the demands of honor and impulses of generosity of those who suffer under injustice. Elsewhere, universal pursuit of wealth dethrones God and pays divine honor to Mammoth and Beelzebub. Selfishness rules supreme to win wealth, becomes the whole business of life. The villainies of legalized gaming and speculation become the epidemic. Treachery is but the evidence of shrewdness. Office becomes the prey of successful faction. Country, like Actaeon, is torn by the hounds of villains that, as carefully educated in their trade, most greedily plunder when it's in man, I'm getting tired. By what right, the voice demands, does a creature always engaged in the work of mutual robbery and slaughter, who makes his own interests his god, claim to be the nature superior to the savage beasts in which he is the prototype? When the shadows of horrible doubt fall upon the soul that would feign love and believe in darkness, of which is the surrounded you and is a symbol, it doubts the truth of revelation, its own spirituality, the existence of a beneficent God. It asks itself not to idle for hope a great progress of humanity toward perfection, and whether when it advances one respect, it does not retrogress into some other, but compensation, whether a way of compensation, whether advance in civilization is not increase of selfishness, whether freedom does not necessarily lead to licenses and anarchy, whether destitution and debasement of the masses does not inevitably follow the increase of population and commercial and manufacturing prosperity. It asks itself whether man is not the sport of a blind, merciless fate, whether all philosophies are not delusions, and all religions the fantastic creations of human vanity and self-conduct, and above all, whether the reason is abandoned as a guide. The faith of a Buddhist and Brahmin has not the same claims over sovereignty and implicit, unreasoning credence as any other. Wow, he is really optimistic, isn't he? You know, it sounds very much like Mark Twain in a lot of ways, from that same time period. And the book is, a lot of it's like that, but it would switch around completely to different topics, like seemingly randomly. But hey, I mean, can you really say he's not right about what he said about, you know, the behavior of human beings being like it is? and has not changed to this day since the 1870s. Yeah, obviously things have changed, but that deep savage is still in there somewhere. You know, it's sad, but it's true.